Here's a few news articles that caught my attention. This one, someone just pointed out in a stream discussing Paul's security podcast. So California is going to put digital car titles on the blockchain. I just saw this article, so I haven't read it all, but are using the Tezos blockchain, which is one of the lesser known ones, and they're going to make a private blockchain, which is certainly the application that makes the most sense for most purposes. You don't have a public blockchain like Bitcoin, you have a private blockchain, and then the blockchain is just a way to have multiple copies of a database that synchronize. It really isn't anything much different than, say, Dropbox, where you put a file on one machine and it automatically copies to another. So, it's all right. And if you take the 141, we set up these private test nets, you'll learn how to do it. They're not too difficult to set up. It's just not entirely clear that it does anything that you couldn't do with older technology, really. But anyway, that's what they're going to use. And this one was pretty interesting. Self-driving cars are in San Francisco. Several companies are allowed to run them. And the main one I hear about is Waymo. And apparently, they are really making a mess of the city. They go to police zones that have been taped off, and they try to push their way past the tape to get in there. They said they were invading some area they weren't supposed to go, and the cop could not make it stop except by smashing the windshield. And they say there have been something like 100 events this year, or 100 events over the last year, of these things fouling up traffic by just getting stuck and being confused. So they seem to be a mess, and they say they need some kind of better regulation and controls these self-driving cars. All right. So Ron DeSantis' latest attempt to run for president and to make himself popular is to celebrate Black History Month by getting rid of the Black History program in Florida. And technically, he's letting some part of it through, but resisting part of it. And so the College Board has revised their African American Studies course to remove Black Lives Matter from it and to take the 1619 project and make it optional instead of required. So this is the kind of compromise with bigots that we had to do many, many times in this country. So it is pretty discouraging for people who would like to see racial equality, but it makes him popular with the Republican base in Florida. And it may be the winning formula to win the presidency. This has been happening originally the Republican Party was the anti-slavery party and the Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party. But Richard Nixon in 1960s implemented the Southern strategy where the Republican Party would now be the racist party in order to get votes in the South. And they succeeded in flipping the South from Democrats to Republicans. And the two parties switched position. Now the Democrats are against bigotry and the Republicans are pro-bigotry. And so it goes. Anyway, so Japan's NTT, which I think is their telegraph company, they are worried because 5G and 6G cell phones have a higher data rate, but they're also using a higher frequency, and higher frequencies cannot go through windows and walls very well. So people inside buildings are not going to be able to get a good signal. So they're developing a new material to make the windows out of that will let this stuff through, and it's really quite clever. It's a material created with a pattern of some other material in it, specially designed to let the wavelengths that are required go through. And this is related to an invisibility cloak that they developed a few years ago. They made a cloak of invisibility where what you do is you make material that has like stripes in it at a certain distance apart related to the wavelength of light, and now you can bend that light in a special way. So you could bend that light around something to make something invisible, but only at one wavelength. And I think only for light coming from one direction. But anyway, it's the same kind of technology they're doing here. They're making technology that will cause the 5G and 6G signals coming in to just be bent down to where the people are, but not to be bounced off by the glass. So it's an interesting idea. Yeah. Yes, you put in new windows, some new material. Or 7G, 8G. Well, yes, probably so. That's right. As you move, because you get more data, you have to go to a higher frequency. And the problem with higher frequencies is they don't go penetrate materials.
They're gonna pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative would be to force you to have a router inside in every room. That would get cheap. At some point, that would get cheaper. Yeah. Anyway, so Samba is the Windows file sharing client for Linux using the SMB protocol, and it turns out to have a serious bug because it worked by comparing the MD5 signature. They used an MD5 algorithm as a hashing algorithm, and this has been known for about 20 years to not be unsafe because there are collisions in MD5, and so you can construct two objects with the same MD5, and if you do that, then you can fool Samba and fool its authentication. And so there's a couple of vulnerabilities just this week where people are still relying on MD5, and as we know, MD5 has a weakness. People should really be using SHA-256 or SHA-512 these days. Let's see, someone says, complex wireless environments, a job for machine learning. Well, it could be, yeah. Setting out wireless access points for the maximum signal is in fact pretty complicated because the radio bounces around in the room. Anyway, this one we were just talking about on Paul's Security Podcast. So Binwalk is a tool that you use immensely for reverse engineering. If you download the firmware for a router or any other device, you just get a single file, and that's like a compressed file, and in that is all the data to run the operating system, and you use Binwalk to open it. It's like an extraction utility. And like many other extraction utilities, it has vulnerabilities so that if you put in a malicious file during the extraction process, it can take over your machine or execute code of some sort. And so this is true of most unzippers, and that's why, anyway, and the thing about this is somebody found this vulnerability, and they couldn't find anybody responsible for Binwalk, which is an open source project. They couldn't get anybody to care or fix it, and it still hasn't been fixed. And so they had an argument about whether this is like irresponsible of them or not. I think it's not, because if you are extracting unknown firmware, you should treat that like malware and do it in a disposable virtual machine. You shouldn't trust a random file not to be malicious. But anyway, it is a thing to know, in case anybody didn't know, that running extractors on unknown files is dangerous. The same thing is true of doing forensic examination on unknown files. All right. If you get a flipper is this little device you carry around that can emit radio signals, and it's programmable, so you can use it to perform radio frequency attacks. You can program it to unlock cars, to turn off televisions, to control any radio or infrared device. And so people have accumulated the data files, these IR data files. These are files you can download to send the correct signals to control any of these various devices like CD players and cable boxes, cameras. Users have figured out what the right signal is and made the file, so you can download the file and use it to control various devices. There was one of these at a presentation Caitlin did at Pacific Hackers a few months ago, and they found out you could open the gas port on a Tesla with a known file, and they went out and did it to somebody's Tesla. So all the Tesla.
What did they run it on?
I think, what do you mean? I think it's just radio.
No, but these are files, right?
Yeah, you run it on you have to get a Flipper Zero. And let me put one up here. You have to buy these, and they're very hard to get because they're made in a foreign country, I think Russia. And they had a huge shipment coming in, and PayPal froze their account and froze their $3 million. So they couldn't get the whole shipment because they've been getting them for like a year or two, and then PayPal suddenly decided that they're malicious and is blocking them. So like most hacking things, people got upset, but that's what it is. Little device looks like a game, and you have a SD card you can stick in here to program it, and then you can send out any kind of infrared or radio, and so you can program it to replace any remote and to hack into any radio device if it has a vulnerability. The most common one is where you're just replaying a fixed signal, like a garage door opener, but it can also do more complicated attacks, where it listens. Infrared and radio, yeah. So most wireless traffic, so it's the wireless multi-tool. And the people that get it are very happy with it. They're pretty hard to get right now. All right, and I'm going to look at the SQL injection link. I thought that was working. Linux Journey is down, and I took it off the list of projects. Anyway, let's see, a couple more of these. So that's where you can get some files for it. Now, so a Canadian province is trying to decriminalize hard drugs like fentanyl and heroin and stuff. This has been tried in various nations. It's that way in Amsterdam. Various people say you should just stop locking people in prison for taking these drugs, but instead you should send them to treatment. So we'll see what comes of that. People had this idea for decades. And
Hong Kong is banning CBDs.
What's that?
Hong Kong is banning CBDs.
Yes, Hong Kong is the opposite. Hong Kong is banning CBD, treating it like heroin. Yeah, I probably saw that. So that's the other way to go, ban everything. You could also allow everything. Currently, we're in the middle, where you have a whole bunch of cops trying to arrest people selling drugs and dealing drugs. So,
Imagine people sell marijuana right on the streets.
yeah, now in San Francisco, sure, it's just legal. In California, I think most U.S.
It's
states,
supposed to be like 1 gram, right? So, anything more than that, it's like treated as a dealer.
well, I think cannabis and CBD oil are pretty much legal.
No,
But-
marijuana.
Yeah.
There's a limit, it's legal.
Oh, there's probably a limit, yeah.
Less than 1 gram is legal, but then more than that, it's treated as a dealer.
You need like a license or something.
Selling is not legal.
Yeah, you need like a license or something. Yeah, like alcohol. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, so the Millennium Tower has been a big issue in San Francisco. It is slowly tilting. It's tilting like 28 inches now. And they've had like the third attempt to fix it. And now they claim they finally put piles underneath it that are hitting bedrock. So it should stop sinking. So that would be nice because it's already tilted over 28 inches at the top. And they say when it tilts 42 inches, it will be so crooked that the elevators won't work anymore and it won't be safe to live in anymore. So they have to stop it pretty soon.
Just slap a label on the Leaning Tower.
It is. It's the Leaning Tower of San Francisco. It is. Anyway, so,
It's a tourist attraction.
well, yeah, that's one option. But anyway, all right. So anyway, that's all the news I wanted to mention.